screen all good? Okay, so cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be giving this presentation today and hopefully share some of our experience with EyeWire and kind of have a discussion about citizen science and crowdsourcing. So I'm actually the executive director of EyeWire, Citizen Science Game to Map the Brain, and I'm the community manager for this new project, Flywire, which I'll talk about later. But I've been doing crowdsourcing in neuroscience for like 10 years now with Sebastian Sung. So EyeWire is kind of our flagship first project that's been around for 10 years. But before I dive into EyeWire, I just want to talk a little bit about citizen science as a whole. So citizen science is not new. It's definitely taken off in popularity in recent years as more people have gotten access to faster internet and better phones. But it's been around for over 100 years. One of the first noted citizen science projects is the Audubon Christmas bird count. That's been around for that's started over 100 years ago. It kind of a nice inflection point from when people used to do a Christmas bird hunt. They replaced it with a Christmas bird count. So humanity moving forward one step at a time. There are thousands of citizen science projects around the world, millions of participants, probably tens of thousands of publications. I don't actually even know the stats on the number of publications, but it all just kind of goes to demonstrate the variability and versatility of citizen science as a way to not just do more science, but to engage the public in science and to invite people to take action on something that they're passionate about. Because I think a lot of citizen scientists are doing projects that they love. They're not doing it to get paid. They're not doing it because they have to. They're doing it because they want to participate in something that they like. I found these interesting stats. 1 in 10 Americans have contributed to a citizen science project within the past year. And about a quarter of Americans have contributed to citizen science at some point in their life. Now, I'm working in citizen science all day, every day, and those numbers really surprised me. But there's lots of projects like iNaturalist and mobile apps that people are using. And the bird count is a really popular one, but I think it's really nice to see that there is a high level of engagement, at least in Americans, but there's definitely a long way to go as far as extending the citizen science opportunity to other populations and people outside like the Western world. I would say America and Europe probably constitute a lot of the citizen science population, but there's obviously billions of other people that are not in that subset of the population that citizen science project administrators could do a better job of reaching. Citizen science projects, a lot of them are in person, so like water quality monitoring or bird counts, species tracking. There's a lot of really awesome in-person experiences where you get to kind of learn about how like maybe field biology is working. But there's a growing cohort of citizen science projects that are online and specifically getting gamified, so citizen science games, one of which is EyeWire. So EyeWire was one of the first citizen science games. It was definitely the first citizen neuroscience game, and it was the first one to use AI as sort of the backend. So in EyeWire, we're doing connectomics, which is looking at the synaptic level connections of neurons, and we do this from electron microscopy data sets that you use AI to align and then semi-automatically reconstruct. But it still takes a lot of human effort to get the fully proofread neurons all the way down to the synapses. So that's where EyeWire came in. This is a little screen capture showing EyeWire. So when you open up the site, you're served one neuron. So this is a cell from the retina in the eye of a mouse. And you're served this little cube. So that little blue thing is a segment of a neuron, and these black and white images are electron microscopy images. They've been stained so you can see the boundaries of the cell in dark gray. And the AI has like broken up the whole volume into all these little pieces. And basically what the players are doing is kind of coloring inside the lines in 2D. And as they color in 2D, it adds a corresponding 3D segment. So the challenge is to map a branch of a neuron from one side of the cube to the next. And when you think you're done, you click submit. It compares your reconstruction with the reconstruction of other accurate players that did the same volume. So in this way, we go cube by cube by cube by cube, and we eventually map out entire neurons like what you're seeing here. So EyeWire's reconstructed like, I don't know, thousands of neurons over the years. We've had a number of publications. The site's kind of getting more complicated and a lot of features that are hopefully we're going to have in our, sorry, this is a screen recording for a DOE thing that I did a little while ago. But there's plugins in EyeWire that were built by the community. We have lots of personal stats. There's events, team competitions. There's a leaderboard. People have a whole badge system and a profile where they can kind of see how much they've contributed. Actually, this person, Christoph Crook, who said hi in chat, built this plugin thing up at the top that allows these really elite players to kind of keep track of their more complicated endeavors in EyeWire. So that's kind of like a snapshot of EyeWire as a citizen science project. Since it launched, over 300,000 people from around the world have signed up. It's pretty large for a citizen science project. Now, as far as 300,000 participants, they're not all online every time, but there is a really active cohort. We would call like sort of our power players, the people who we know, because there's chat, and so admins are in there like talking to the players, and the top contributors in EyeWire play for literally years, and are spending like 20 to 40 hours a week in the game, like contributing to science. And we've had a number of publications that came out in EyeWire. And I would say notably, not just the publications, but EyeWire worked as a proof of concept for, can you use AI? Can you make connectomics feasible? And can you engage the public in the task that people were doing in EyeWire? People said it was really boring. And we'd never get people to do it willingly for fun. But I'm glad that turned out to not be correct. I think one of the things that sets EyeWire apart, or maybe not sets EyeWire apart, but it's sort of a hallmark of citizen science, is this sense of community. So there are players, like they're a part of the lab. It's not just usernames. I mean, these are real human beings who are choosing to play this game. There's definitely more fun games than EyeWire. I mean, if you're a hardcore gamer, EyeWire may not even be considered a game, but there's definitely aspects of gamification to it. But the people who are playing EyeWire are like spending their time in the game, and they all get to know each other. We do these competitions, like I mentioned, and a couple of the players sponsored swag. So they actually win like t-shirts and stickers and mugs and things that we actually ship all over the world, prizes for some of these competitions. That's been going on for, gosh, like 6 years now. And they post updates in the forum of, just kind of fun things. Like we do jack-o'-lantern contests and just fun things to kind of make a sense of community. But I like the slide because it kind of puts some faces to the sort of unknown citizen scientists that are really the force and the reason that these projects are made possible. So citizen science really only works if you have citizen scientists. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the outreach endeavors that we do. So I think the brain is so beautiful, and I think neurons are just mesmerizing and wonderful. And the longer that I started working, in EyeWire and in some of our newer data sets, I just realized that most people have never seen a neuron. We've done a lot of events and exhibits, and I mean, people would be surprised that there's like more than one type of cell in the brain. So we try to kind of do these activities that, I don't know, just catch people where they are. And maybe we're not trying to kind of teach them everything about the brain, but rather to just spark a little bit of curiosity. So this was an event that we did at the Cambridge Public Library. So I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it was a giant build a neuron with all these Post-it notes. It was an exhibit aside this mural that we live painted over the course of a week for this open to the public makerspace that was going into the library. And lots of kids came through drawing all these little sections of dendrites and slowly building the neuron. And we did these like cutout posters where we literally just cut out the shapes of neurons to kind of show the different morphology. And we had like 3D printed brains. I like art a lot. So this is Daniela Gamba, who was our illustrator at EyeWire. She, like I said, painted this mural over the course of a week, and we kind of put this idea together, like pitched it to the city, and we wanted it to be something that people could take part in. So not just like she's painting in a room and then this thing is hung up and people see it when the event opens, but like team members from our lab came out and we set up a big display, and we tried to make it so that people had an opportunity to like interact with real neuroscientists and see real neurons and real neuroscience data. Again, this is Danny doing this live painting at this Girls in STEM Day that the MIT Museum put on. And we had like a live laptops thing set up. We did a lot of things with the MIT Museum, even like wine and neuron painting, which I can say was one of my personal favorites. It was a really unique way to kind of have people paint like these actually, that's what's hanging on my wall behind me is these starry neurons, Van Gogh inspired impressionist neurons. We also kind of team up with different art exhibits. So we make a lot of in renders, like 3D images and animations that we just make Creative Commons freely available to the public. But this is actually a snapshot of this kiosk. It's like a touchscreen version of EyeWire that we built. That's a part of this Barbican Museum in London, this exhibit that they did called AI More Than Human. This is it traveling in China, but it's been to like 6 countries around the world, but it's just another way to engage people. Now, I know that people going to an exhibit titled AI More Than Human are probably already going to be interested in neuroscience, but trying to make it more accessible and also to teach people about the, I think in neuroscience it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Like people think we know a lot more than we do, and they also think we know a lot less than we know, ironically. Like we know so much and so little, and both of those things are true. So just showing people where a lot of the opportunities are for discovery, I think can maybe ignite a little curiosity in like the next generation of neuroscientists. We've done some big stuff. Like we made these animations that we just made freely available, and this videographer emailed us and was like, can we put them in Times Square? And we're like, yeah, you can. So never know where your science outreach is going to land. Like we didn't intend for these things to be on billboards when we made them. We literally just thought they would be on YouTube. But that's, I think, part of the wonderfulness of citizen science is that you make all this outreach material and it allows the general public to see science in a way that they might not otherwise encounter and get that like, whoa, that amazingness factor, because science is truly so amazing and wonderful. And I think a lot of the times it comes across as stodgy and boring, when really we could do a little better at communicating the wonder. So we do a 4-credit internship every summer. So gosh, we've had now like 35 illustration and design students from Massachusetts College of Art, creating assets like this for science outreach. Everything we do is Creative Commons. So like we're not selling stuff, we're not making money, we're not paywalling things. So this is just a simplified animation showing an action potential moving from one neuron to the next or these little sort of representations of what different cells in the brain do, like your astrocyte is your defender and your oligodendrocyte is like putting things together and your microglia is like running to the rescue to keep things going, to try to make it easier to remember and make it like fun and pleasing. And then, of course, we try to make things that are a little bit badass too, with renders and animations. So this is actually an animation from IARPA microns, which was a cubic millimeter from mouse visual cortex that we haven't done any crowdsourcing on, but that the technology stack from EyeWire directly translated into this. And then this IARPA microns project was sort of the feasibility study for, can you do larger connectomes? Can you do a cubic millimeter of brain? And the answer is yes, you can. So that's always good to hear. And we have created this page, still a work in progress, but science.EyeWire, that just aims to explain the science of connectomics, give a little basic neuroscience 101. And we tried to make it beautiful and approachable. It's not a page for scientists, it's a page for students, it's a page for people who are curious about the brain. So what's next? EyeWire, the unit is cubes, but it's been around for 10 years now. And the AI has evolved considerably. I don't know how many iterations we've gone through, but it's now to the point that you can feed a large data set in and realign it, and the AI can largely reconstruct like these not entirely complete neurons, but you can roughly see that that's a pyramidal neuron in yellow there. It still requires a large amount of human effort, but we can now tackle much larger volumes, and it's, I think, representative of the type of technological evolution that lots of more tech-heavy citizen science projects will be facing in the coming years, which is as the underlying technology that like allowed the citizen science project to exist in the first place, right? Like what is the human in the loop. How is the human helping to solve a problem in science? As the technology evolves, the task for the human changes. So we're still crowdsourcing, but now we're crowdsourcing in a fly and with a very different sort of user interface. So this is a fly. This is the brain of a fly. EyeWire is a human AI collaboration to map the fly connectome. So this is the brain of a fly. It's divided up into like 75-ish regions that are sort of functionally categorized. We think that there are about 140,000 or so cells in the brain of the fly, and those cells are connected by about 25 million synapses, for which you can see here. So the fly neurons are polyadic, which means they can have multiple connections in a single synapse. But we're really close to finishing the fly connectome, like really, really close. So FlyWire has been around. It started in 2019, and it's different than EyeWire because initially it was a crowdsourcing platform for Drosophila labs and for professional proofreaders. And about 1 year ago, we invited the citizen scientists from EyeWire. We invited actually just the elite citizen scientists, like the top 100 players of EyeWire. And on average, I think there were only like 20 players or something that got into FlyWire production access that were actually contributing to the connectome. On average, each of those players had 7.5 years experience doing EM reconstruction. So it's a really elite group of players. But those players have proofread like 15% of the entire fly brain, and they annotated about 20% of all of the neurons in the entire brain, which is like an astronomical amount of effort from such a small cohort. In FlyWire, there's, I think, 400 or 500 total people. I mean, it's most of it's a lot of the labs that are publishing the most in Drosophila. And now we're trying to, now that the connectome is almost fully proofread, we're moving into this new phase sort of expanding access to the data set. Like we don't even have a preprint that's out yet, but it's coming soon. Actually, on Thursday, we're having a town hall similar to this meeting, but it's with all the Drosophila labs where we're sharing figures from our main connectome paper for the first time. So many years in the making. And in addition to proofreading the cells, this is like the first adult centralized brain connectome. There was C. elegans like 30 years ago. There was a larval connectome of Drosophila that's like 4,000 neurons that came out like a month ago. And this is 140,000 neurons. A lot of them are sort of haven't been seen before. So we've been crowdsourcing the annotations for those cells as well. Like 50,000 annotations have come from the FlyWire community. And just the fact that the citizen scientists have done 20% of those annotations, I feel like was very surprising and awesome to me. I mean, the citizen scientists were kind of going on these research studies and they were going through literature reviews and posting all these figures in order to familiarize themselves with the anatomy of all these fly neurons, because the fly cells are crazy. They look like something alien. I mean, this APL, this is the longest neuron in the fly brain. It's like 6 centimeters long. I mean, a whole fly is like just this big. It's pretty wild. But the citizen scientists have been a huge help in mapping this connectome. And the platform's not even really gamified. Like it's basically a fancy tool for researchers. Which kind of brings me to this point of citizen science is about cheering each other on, like, and lifting each other up. I know in science, there's a lot of competition and whatnot, but when you're doing crowdsourcing projects, people who might otherwise be competing and maybe who even are a little bit competing are also sort of collaborating. So, I mean, in FlyWire, you have people working together, and every edit that is made on a neuron is immediately available to the entire world, everyone who has production access. And FlyWire is open to anyone. Like anyone can say, I want early access. They just have to kind of go through some training and agree to the FlyWire principles. But kind of like citizen science is people celebrating the success of others and kind of cheering each other on so that we can work together to make resources that make science better as a whole. And again, just kind of lifting each other up. And even when there are sort of competitions, it's like a friendly competition. And in citizen science, like I'm sharing this because there's a story from EyeWire. So every year that there's a World Cup, we do the EyeWire Cup. And players are supposed to join the country that they are playing from. But what happens is all the power players, they all know each other. They're all sort of friends, and they recruit everyone else in EyeWire, and they all join Team Antarctica because they don't want to compete with each other. They want to collaborate. Like, there's a little bit of healthy competition because if they're all on the same team, they all win. But at the same time, they didn't want to be like fighting against each other too much. So I felt like it was a really sweet way to make fun, in a competition without it being too kind of like head to head, not too intense. Because at the end of the day, you're doing science, you're kind of doing a little bit of experimentation. You're not exactly sure kind of how everything's gonna come out, but you got to try new things and try new approaches, in order to kind of push things forward. And I'll just wrap things up by saying, this is the tip of the iceberg. Sorry, I like puns. it's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to citizen science, but also when it comes to neuroscience. I mean, if you look at the human brain, we know so little about this organ that, not just making humanity and making individuals, but like all of human society, everything that our species has created and thought and done has come from these brains, and brains learning across generations and building on the success of others, and understanding kind of how we are human is the secrets. Their secrets are in there, and I feel like we're still a good ways away, but we're getting so much closer to being able to answer not just a lot of the sort of high level humanity, like philosophical questions, but to be able to, clinically tackle some of the like horrible neurodegenerative diseases that are robbing people of their very selves. I mean, how cruel of a thing to happen in the universe, but hopefully, science is going to be able to address some of these conditions and issues within the brain, and help us just understand how we are, who we are. And I think it will be, the scope of understanding a human brain, a human connectome is huge, it's massive, probably decades in the future. But I think the only way we'll be able to do it will be to just get like everybody on the planet Earth to help. And then who knows where we'll be. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. This was great, Amy. I love all the visualizations, or like the graphics and the characters and stuff. They're really cool. So we'll open it up in a minute for Q&A from all of our audience members. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, and then I'll call on you, and I'll just get the conversation started. And again, this is back and forth. The first question we can start it with is, so a lot of scientific communities have been maybe a little bit slow, or even at times can be a bit hostile to crowdsourced work. So seeing the success from this project, like how did you get the neuroscience community on board with the idea of embracing findings, and what kind of challenges you might have encountered with that, if any?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the beginning, someone at MIT told me to my face that we don't do science, we do PR. They were like, this isn't gonna work. You're never gonna convince people to do this boring task. It was like, I had been working on EyeWire for like 3 months. I was like, oh my God. But so hopefully that didn't turn out to be true. But there's definitely a little bit of reluctance from the science community as far as the accuracy of citizen scientists. So one thing that we immediately did to address that is we did sort of accuracy checks. So we would randomly have experts come in and look over what pro citizen scientists had done. And it really quickly became clear that the citizen scientists are on par with the professional tracers as far as the accuracy of neurons. Our tasks are pretty well suited for that, especially in EyeWire, because you have multiple people checking over each branch of a neuron. We also have sort of different levels of gameplay. So the longer you play EyeWire, you can kind of level up and have more authority within the game that goes alongside your expertise. So you can eventually sort of, if there's really, like, for example, thin branches that are hard for people to find the continuation of, sometimes the neurons can kind of stall as they're growing because you have multiple people mapping around them. So these like sites, we call them, have the ability to sort of overrule the consensus, and they can force a branch to grow, or they can remove a merger that's been accidentally fused on. And another sort of approach to dealing with that is I think looking at people's intent. there are more fun games out there, right? If you're playing EyeWire, you're doing it because you like it. And there's really no motivation for these people to go in and like try to hurt science in order to get ahead in EyeWire. The only time that we ever had issues with that was when we had a partnership with a company in Korea and they randomly decided to start giving away cash, didn't tell us. And then all of a sudden we had all these people cheating because they were getting money. And we had to like refactor a bunch of things in EyeWire. They were basically just these bots that were going through the tutorial, getting the points and then starting over. And it was just kind of crazy. But yeah, we did a little user study thing. And we were trying to understand when people were dropping off after they finished the tutorial, and then they would do one more cube and then they would like disappear. And we did surveys. We just started surveys of people asking them, and they were leaving because they didn't feel confident in what they were doing and they thought they were going to hurt science. And I felt like that really says a lot about citizen science communities. Like they were scared they were going to hurt the project. So they just were like, I'll just step back. Hopefully that answered the question. It was a sort of a roundabout.
Rashmina's audio is probably still cut out, but you can put it in the chat and I can, we can read it out. If anyone has other questions, you can, raise your hand. But I do have another question if I don't see a hand raised for now. So can you tell us a little bit about, maybe you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but tell us maybe more, expand on how you first got involved with the project, and also maybe what skills from perhaps your previous work have made you especially effective in this role?
Yeah, it's really crazy how I got to EyeWire. I mean, I don't have a background in neuroscience. I've published a lot of neuroscience papers now, but I'm not a neuroscientist. I actually met Sebastian when he gave his TED talk. I emptied out everything in my bank account to go to TED the first time. I had a really good mentor I was like, I got accepted to go to this TED conference, but I can't really afford it. What should I do? And I had a great mentor who was like, you know what, if you're going to regret that you didn't go in like 5 years, you should go. So I did. I couch surfed. I was legitimately the most impoverished person at TED. I couch surfed at TED, and that's where I met Sebastian. I was the creative director of a health company in Alabama at the time. So we were doing crowdsourcing wellness, but I was getting more into the brain because we were doing all these interviews with all these engineers in Huntsville, Alabama, where I'm from. And it was just becoming really clear by talking to all these people that the biggest hurdle to health in the brain is itself, right? Like, and I started just internally thinking like, why can't I just summon up instant willpower infinitely? Like, why do I not always do the things that like I know I should do? Or why do I worry about stuff that I know there's no use of worrying about? And I just started emailing all these neuroscientists, and they're like, we don't know. Here's a cocaine study with rats. Like it was just really no good answers. And so when I talked to Sebastian for a while, and it was the first time that I heard about connectomics. And I actually saw like some months later on Twitter that he was starting up EyeWire, and I went and looked at it and I was like, oh, this is a great idea. Get more people. We need to make neuroscience move faster, get different perspectives in there. And I looked at the site and it sucked. It was like really hard to use, it was hard to understand. And so I just emailed him and I was like, I offered to help. I was like, I can link you up with some designers who can maybe help you. Maybe you should try like starting up a blog that explained like why this project exists and And I started kind of just helping them. Then he asked me to come and like lead some brainstorming sessions for their advisory board in Palo Alto. And I just volunteered. They flew me out there, but I went out there, and then he started recruiting me to join his lab. He was like, you need to come join my computational neuroscience lab at MIT. And I was like, are you sure? I don't know if you really need me. And he was like, oh, we've got a lot of neuroscientists. He was like, we need someone to help this crowdsourcing go. And in addition to this creative director in like a healthcare company role, I started the first TEDx in Alabama. Because it's an intellectual wasteland. I'm sorry if any of you guys are in Alabama. It's not that bad, but it's like I was trying to have good conversations with people that were, kind of thinking more philosophically or just thinking about big items. So I started TEDx Huntsville, and eventually started like the TEDx Music Project, which was music from around the world. And so I kind of used TEDx as a model for crowdsourcing. It was when they had first started the TED program, and they had sort of basically a lot of rules, but within the rules, there was sort of like a foundation or like a scaffolding. And within those rules, you can kind of be infinitely creative. And so that's kind of how I approach the crowdsourcing and citizen science that I do kind of to this day. So yeah, now it's 10 years later and I'm still doing this in neuroscience, but it's kind of crazy to see how far the field has come. But yeah, there's my weird path to
Thank you, Amy. Rashmina put a comment and a question in the chat I'm going to read out for her. One thing that I really loved from your talk was the emphasis that you put on creating a sense of community around EyeWire. How did you go about building that community, essentially from scratch?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think we put a lot of emphasis on community from the very beginning. I mean, in the early days of EyeWire, I just had it open all the time in my laptop. And I was just in chat. And anytime someone would say anything, I was like, hi, we were just start chatting. And when people had questions, we would turn those into blog posts because we were like, okay, we know that people are wondering about this. We would, beta test new features with users. The first competitions actually started as like sort of they just naturally like bubbled up within the community. It was like this player was bragging that he was the fastest neuron tracer in the world, and we were like, okay, let's prove it. So we did his username was Crazy Man 4865. I don't know why does my brain remember that, but that was his username. And we did the Crazy Man challenge, which that's what he wanted it to be called. And it was like a 24-hour trace-a-thon. And then that spurred this whole wave of different competitions named after different players in the game. But I think making it so that they feel like they're a part of your lab, not like they're doing free work for you, is a really important part. I mean, that's kind of seeing the human behind the username, and being responsive to community feedback, whether it's good or bad, and addressing issues as they come up. But yeah, really, it was just like talking to people and seeing the questions that were repeatedly being asked. We organized events for the players, like we still do actually when we invited EyeWires to Flywire. We did a citizen science symposium, and we've had talks for them from different researchers, and like we keep them updated on what's going on in the lab. But yeah, I think that was one thing that EyeWire had chat, and in the early days, nobody else had chat. Zooniverse had forums, but forums are not like chat, and we were pretty adamant about chat being reliant and always staying up. And I think chat really helped the community grow because you don't feel like you're alone, like you're not the only person in this Black website. There's lots of people there.
Another question is maybe what's the most surprising thing that you've learned through your work with either EyeWire or now with Flywire?
Honestly, how dedicated the citizen science communities can be. I mean, like I met a number of in the before COVID days, like COVID hit and then I had 2 kids. So it's been a weird couple of years. But before that, we were going to events, and anytime, like, because we knew a lot of the players, we talked to them. Like if I was giving a talk in Europe or something, like I remember we took a train down to Switzerland and had a dinner. There was like an EyeWire meetup that one of the players organized, and they were really into mushrooms, and they cooked like a 4-course mushroom dinner for all these EyeWirers from around Europe, and it was hosted at her house. And just like they all knew each other, like they keep up with each other's lives. I mean, and we've met lots of EyeWirers sort of like at different places around the US and around Europe, really just US and Europe. But like just the amount that they care about the project and that they want us to succeed, and that they know each other. I mean, and just like how dedicated they are has been really like wonderfully surprising to me. And it is definitely hard to find, like I would say, of the lots of people that you recruit to join a project, which we would do by say like partially why we make all those animations and videos and things is to get people to write about EyeWire, get people to share it, so that more people will come. And it's definitely like a tiny fraction of all of the participants who become this core community. But once they're I feel like if they're really dedicated for I don't know, 2 months or something, then they're really likely to stay for years. And it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of amazing to see.
Very cool. Yeah. Looks like Bill has his virtual hand raised. So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Thanks all. So I'm curious on the community building, and I kind of like that comment about you had chat early on, and so it found people to find community. And of course, once that's established, it's easier to move on. I'm wondering how much energy you put into sort of moderating the community, and how much energy you put into kind of keep the community growing, or maybe bubbling into different bubbles, because sometimes there's certain limits to the size how big a community can be before it gets fractured. So I'm kind of, if you could comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So for the moderation side, we actually let the players become moderators. So after probably the first year, we sort of started adding more competition infrastructure onto the site. And so one of the one of the events that we would do would be like every 3 months, and it was this big competition week-long set of like 6 different events. And at the end, we did promotions. And players, the only way for them to level up in the early days was to literally request a promotion. And so they could request to become a moderator. And so we have moderators in chat, and pretty much all the power players are moderators, and they have the ability to like mute or secretly mute. Kind of, we have rules for chat. But as far as how much effort it's definitely a lot of effort to recruit people. And it's I think a lot of effort to retain them, because you have to not just listen to what people say, but you have to do something about it. Like if there's a problem, you have to fix it. If there's a feature that the community really wants, you probably need to build it, or you need to enable them to build it. I mean, actually, we have a bunch of plugins that the players developed that actually make EyeWire way better than it naturally would be. And that actually emerged out of us handling some new feature release very poorly. We like changed the heat map of the overall neuron that had been in place for like 4 years. And we changed the colors a little bit after doing 2 rounds of user testing, and the power players were so mad at us that one of them the next day built this plugin that allowed them to revert all their colors back. And then that was like the first feature of like, I don't know, 20 features that got built into EyeWire that are now essential to using it. Actually, we officially integrated them into the whole EyeWire plugins. But yeah, I do think some sort of dedicated community manager, community management team that can not just kind of stimulate conversation in chat, but that can take ownership of making the feedback in chat actionable and turning it into a reality is pretty essential for these kind of projects.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Amy, you mentioned that, or showed some examples of using AI to sort of create the maps, and that's sort of starting to become a thing. As AI gets more advanced and gets better at performing these tasks, how do you imagine maybe the role of citizen scientists changing to sort of still be involved, but now in parallel with AI? How do you see that evolving?
No, so I didn't even show the gameplay or like the usability difference between EyeWire and Flywire. Not only is the AI so much better that in Flywire, when you start with a cell, it's like largely reconstructed. It's often missing some axon and missing smaller pieces, but also can be missing like lots of branches. But you don't need multiple people to look over the same neuron anymore either. So that's actually one additional reason why we only invited the elite EyeWirers, because we know they're highly accurate. We know that they care a lot about their accuracy. We know that they're dedicated enough to sort of learn about the morphology of these cells, because they look so different types of cells in the fly. They all look like, I don't know how many different types of cells there are, thousands probably, and they have some pretty insane morphology. And if you don't know what they're supposed to look like, it's really easy to make mistakes. So this is definitely a challenge that will need to be solved so we're working on a new citizen science game. It's going to be called Peer into the Brain, for actually a volume of mouse cortex. But the data set hasn't been generated yet, so it's still far off in the future. But the training is definitely challenging. We kind of like punted it into the future with Flywire by only inviting the elite players. But yeah, definitely as the technology evolves and as the machine learning improves, the tasks that humans have to do get harder, a lot harder. So if citizen science in EyeWire is essentially already a game for experts, version 2.0 is a game for even more experts. So the way that we've been approaching it is making the training more fun, like making the training kind of more gamified, so that because it takes a while to kind of get good at these tasks. So that's probably what we're going to see in more citizen science projects as the technology advances, is there's a longer period where you're not contributing, but that period is reasonably fun, hopefully. And then as you graduate from that period, you graduate by like attaining a certain level of expertise, and probably the people that graduate from that onboarding experience will then go on to be the ones that are helping to proofread these data sets or do whatever citizen science task there is. It's a hard problem.
Any other questions from audience? Carol, did I see you on mute?
Yeah. Can I ask what part of cortex?
Yeah, well, okay, so can't tell anyone yet, but yeah, so SungLab is imaging entorhinal cortex now. Actually,
Cool.
it's been imaged a cubic millimeter. Well, it hasn't been imaged, it's been sectioned. So the images, hopefully the images are good. But yeah, it's a cubic millimeter that was done in-house. And originally Pierre was going to be for IARPA microns, which was a cubic millimeter of mouse primary visual cortex. But it's a really large project with a lot of major players in it, and it's kind of hard to do things in that environment. Like there's just too many people that have to okay like everything. So we're just making a new data set. Yeah. But I don't know.
You have,
years. Go ahead.
do you have a dedicated like game engineer team? Like how does that back end kind of work?
Yeah, so in Flywire, it's a collaboration between Sung and Murthy Labs at Princeton, which are both sort of computational and neuroscience labs. So there's a lot of engineers. As far as Flywire goes, there's a lot of our effort lately is actually going to this project Codex, which is this Connectome data explorer. It's this GUI visualization tool that lets you just really easily explore the connectivity of neurons and do network graphs and pathway analysis of the whole fly connectome. And it actually lets people who don't like write Python explore the connectome kind of for the first time. So a lot of our engineering effort has been going there. But yeah, we have a game developer actually from CMU who was working on Flywire. But basically we hire full stack engineers, so they're kind of able to migrate to which sections of which projects need them the most critically. But yeah, there's a lot of different aspects as far as the technology that sort of underlies these projects.
Looks like Emily has a question or has her hand raised. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, really, really fantastic talk and discussion. I wish I had more to like more questions. But something that I was thinking about, kind of throughout your talk, because for instance, like my exposure to like citizen science was, as a kid, right? Like, and I think I don't know in your 10% of people who have done it, like what they're, or the 25% who have done it over their lifetime, how many of them had it during, K through 12 education versus as an adult? That'd be kind of interesting to know. Which is, I guess, a question
really
wasn't the question I meant to ask. But I don't know if you have that information.
I don't know. It seemed high to me. That seems like a huge fraction of the population that has done citizen. When I saw those stats, I was like, I feel like there should be more engagement on all these citizen science projects. But you're right. Probably a lot of it is in schools or a lot of the apps that, you're doing like a plant identification that's also doing some citizen science sort of on the back end. So I guess the level of participation probably varies depending on.
Yeah. And so on that note, and also, with kind of the discussion we've been having with FlySci and like only inviting, expert levels, EyeWire and things like that. I guess like what are kind of your thoughts about like, I guess like the citizen science pipeline? It feels weird to call it that, but like, getting and also just like from the perspective of like, in inclusivity, like how do we get more people involved in citizen science?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think if you figure out the answer to that, let me know. But as far as kind of what my kind of hot take is on that, I do think of it sort of as a pipeline, right? Like every story that gets written, every video that gets made, every SharePoint is an opportunity for more people to discover citizen science or to discover a project that might be interesting to them. So I think, there's these platforms like SciStarter that list all the different citizen science projects, but I feel like people have to go in and like make an account, and it's not really kind of, I don't know if it's been a while since I looked at SciStarter, but I don't know if it kind of like takes your own personal preferences as far as like what topics are interesting to you or what kind of time you have or kind of where you are as far as what projects you can contribute to. But I think citizen science project administrators, myself included, need to do a better job of telling the story of the science as it's unfolding and making media that can be shared like on tweets or TikTok or whatever, to tell the story of how the discoveries are being made, like so that it can be something that's not just like you write one story about, okay, EyeWire launched and then a huge wave of people come and then they never cover it again, so that it's like this journey that everyone's going on together, so that it becomes sort of like a movement that everyone can be a part of. And maybe it's that we need more, I don't want to say centralization, but like maybe we need a huge landmark citizen science project that everybody would be interested in. I don't know if such a project could even exist. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my perspective on that is, and that's what I've been trying to do, but it is hard to tell a story that's compelling to the general public. Like, I mean, Flywire, for example, like, okay, yes, we're mapping the whole fly brain. We're starting to think about, how do we tell the story when this paper comes out, and coming up against sort of the uncomfortable reality is like we have to explain like why should anyone care about a fly brain being mapped, like why should you care about the retina of a mouse? Like what does that do for an average or random person like on the street? So framing it in the bigger picture of scientific discovery and human progress as a whole, I think maybe that's something helpful. I don't know.
I mean, my bias is related to like education, like partner with museums, teachers, I don't know, I was just thinking like it'd be super cool if like you go to a neuroscience exhibit and as part of the exhibit they're like, and if you want you can like sit down and play this game that's going to contribute to our understanding of the brain now that you've like learned about it.
Yeah. We've definitely tried to do that. So EyeWire has been a part of like, I don't know, 6 exhibits or something over the years, like as far as like big exhibits. And teachers use EyeWire a lot. I know that there have been like at least 100 classrooms in EyeWire because we always get a lot of trolls in chat when there's a classroom on. And then sometimes it spreads out of the classroom into the whole school. So we get trolled by an entire middle school. It's astounding. And so we put up, like, we made curriculum, we put all these blog posts up. We're like, if you're a teacher, like, let us know. We'll give a presentation to your class, like, and no one ever contacts us. Like, nobody ever tells us before they put their students in. So I don't know. I do think that a lot of teachers are using citizen science in the classroom, and it's awesome. Probably for our next project, we should just make it like when you go to the landing page, like teacher portal or something, so that it's easier for them to get in touch and whatnot. Yeah. The trolls. I forgot about the trolls.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, middle schoolers, like, yeah.
They would be persistent too. Like I mean, they're more tech savvy, so they're like making all these new accounts, like
I was terrible as a middle schooler, so I get it.
Teenagers
Rashmina,
are so mean.
Rashmina had another question in the chat that I'll read off for her. What's the biggest translatable lesson learned that you'd like to share with community science project in a different field?
Well, that citizen science knowledge is transferable. I mean, there are a lot of existing citizen science projects. Maybe some of them have sort of run their course, or they're still in the process of it. But I would say that at this point, moving forward, if a new citizen science project is coming out, it should absolutely be collaborating with existing citizen science projects, because there are so many, and there's a lot of people that maybe they're bored of the current thing, or at least we know that they care about a certain topic. I would not start a citizen science project from scratch without trying to collaborate. Now, I realize this could also be like, oh, let me come and rip your whole user base out from under you. But I really do think that there's a lot of projects that are sort of at the end of their lifespan. And so having a new outlet for those citizen scientists, I think that's something that's sort of I don't know if it's really been approached, because no one wants to talk about like the end of a citizen science project, but yeah, I would say tap into the existing community and more citizen science. I love citizen science. It's such a great opportunity to kind of get the public excited about science. I mean, if we want to fund science and we want it to keep moving forward, we got to make the general public care. And I mean, some of the most interesting questions that we've ever been able to ask, and questions that we haven't even imagined, I mean, are going to get asked and answered in our lifetimes. So exposing young people to all the delicious opportunities and like exciting avenues of science, like citizen science, is a great way to do that.
I have another question. So it seems like primarily the audience or the citizen scientists in these projects have been, I guess, like younger people. Have you thought about, I guess, maybe for these projects or others in the future, about engaging with different age groups?
Oh yeah, so our age group span is all over the place.
Oh, okay, maybe, okay.
Yeah, I probably the people that post their pictures in the forum are younger, but we definitely have a lot of retired people who play, and yeah, but I feel like there's almost like there's a gap in the middle. Like there's probably not as many like 30, 40-year-olds. I don't know, but there's a lot of like students and younger adults, and then there's a lot of retired people that are playing, and it's kind of interesting to see like, young adults in chat with someone that is like 70. I don't know, but yes, definitely spanning the age gap. It's harder to like when we would try to think about growing EyeWire and getting more people to help. I know at one point we sought sort of advice from like a marketing group, and they're like, "Who's your demographic? Who's your target demographic?" And we were like, "Well, here's the stats. I mean, on the age, they're pretty much distributed all over the place." And they're like, going to be really hard. We did see that our audience was 60% female. So that was actually one reason why when we did kind of the science page, we tried to make it like a little bit more appealing to girls in STEM and girls in STEAM. But it turns out that's like kind of just more of a puzzle game versus first person shooter game demographic than anything EyeWire related. But yeah, I do think, I don't know how to reach more. I think maybe like depicting different types of people in the art is maybe one way that we've tried to do it. So not just showing like white people is one way, and trying to go to places, I don't know, where just like any students can come up. Like one thing we did was we made these posters at the zoo in Boston, and they're about animal brains and different senses that animals have, or different attributes of animal behavior and how that ties into their brain. And when we were working with the zoo, they told us that like 150,000 students come every year. So we were like, this is a great way to put neuroscience in a surprising place, in a place that people are engaged and in front of people who might not otherwise see it. So I don't know, just thinking creatively about, I don't know, how to get science where it's unexpected.
Awesome. And I'm sure many folks on the call here would agree with those sentiments. Looks like we are almost at the hour. If there's maybe one last question, I don't see any hands. If not, that'd be a perfect time to wrap things up. Thank you, Amy, for joining us. It was a great discussion, great presentation. I feel like we've all learned a lot about citizen science and now can think a little more deeply about it, looking at other projects as well. And thanks everybody for joining the call and participating in a STEAM team event. I know some of you are already aware of what STEAM team does, but for those of you that maybe haven't engaged with us as much, I'm just putting our YouTube channel on in the chat there. And so you can check us out. You can reach out to us if you want to be part of other events. And with that, I think we will wrap up. Thank you again, Amy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good one, guys and girls and everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Bye.